What is going on, guys? Kyle Williams here with Clover Trading, and today I'm going to talk about my 3 best trades of 2024 thus far. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So first one for me was SMCI. This happened back in January of 2024. Awesome AI tech sector stock. Believe they make AI chips. Doesn't really matter. But the point is they're in that bubble. They're in that sector, along with NVIDIA that ran up huge at the same time. And so while NVIDIA was running up, so was SMCI. Now SMCI had a great run from 300s all the way up to 1100 at almost its peak. In a matter of a couple to a few weeks. And so normally I don't really trade large caps, but with a daily chart like this is something I couldn't ignore. It was starting to speed up in a parabolic fashion, which for those who know how I like to trade, I enjoy kind of mean reversion to the short side. So anything that kind of goes up too quickly, I like trying to catch that kind of first pullback. And so SMCI here on this first red day was massive. It respected the red green level, 2 or 3 days leading up to this blow off top out the morning open, and just did not have a strong enough move within the first 15 to 20 minutes of these first couple of days. Maybe if we go into the intraday here. So here's the intraday of that day. Again, opening up around 1,040. It had a move to about the pre-market highs of 1080, but again, could not get more juice going, could not, within the first 10, 15 minutes, could not even get above the pre-market highs. And then it cracked. I remember getting short starting in around VWAP here. And then by the time it broke new low day, I added some more. And by the time it went red of the day, which is around I think 1,000, somewhere in there, I added my last piece, and the rest was history. Once it went red, it panicked from not only 1,000 down to 900, but then went as low as 870. I ended up covering it all in the 890s here. Didn't reshort the rest of the day thinking it was going to bounce, and it actually went even lower to the low 800s. So quite an impressive range of the downside. Made over 76 grand on this particular red day. It's not every day you get this kind of liquidity, this kind of range on a stock. And so I kind of knew how ideal it was going into it. And so I bet a slightly bigger, at worst case, if I had stopped out over, the lower high here or the high of day, it would have been in the 20 to 25K range. It went down 3 times better than I risked, so 3-to-1 risk reward. Hence I made over, 75K. So that's my first best trade, or my best trade of 2024 so far. The next one that I really loved was the GBTC Bitcoin ETF kind of conversion. So for those who had been following Grayscale for a long time, Grayscale is a company that owns cryptocurrencies in a trust form, right? Most of their funds and trusts trade on the OTC market. Hence, they do not have to follow their net asset value of the fund or the assets they own. So for a long time, GBTC owned Bitcoin, but it was trading at a massive discount to what it owned. Say it owned, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, but it was trading at 800 million, right? It was at a 20% discount. And so going into the ETF, when a ticker like this or a fund like this becomes an ETF, that net asset value has to be pegged to the exact asset holding. So that 20% discount was going to go away. Now, the reason why I was so convicted on this trade is because once BlackRock pretty much filed that they want to apply for an ETF, it was kind of like the floodgates were open, right? BlackRock has had 499 out of 500 ETF applications get approved. It was not if, but when their application was going to get approved. And if BlackRock was going to get approved, so was Grayscale GBTC. So right when it came pretty obvious on a fake PR or a fake headline that the ETF was approved, but it was only 2 months out or 2 or 3 months out, I did start buying a bunch in the 23s all the way up to 27 area. And then just the idea was swinging it into the ETF announcement. And so the last date of that ETF announcement was January, I think 11th or 12th. Of course, the SEC delayed it as long as it possibly could. So they did wait till January 11th or 12th to approve that ETF. But again, by then, the cat was out of the bag, the floodgates have opened. And by that time, GBTC had ran from, 23 to 27, where I had bought it, all the way up to about the 40s, low 40s. And so I ended up selling most of my shares, if not all of them, by 40, 41, maybe in the 39s of it. So again, making, what is that, almost 50% plus on that long-term kind of trade. Not a typical trade I take. I'm not one to maybe swing long like this for an ETF, let alone an ETF coming to the marketplace like this. It's a very unique kind of one-off scenario, but it's something I'd been following for a very long time. So I'd been prepared, almost years in advance. I'd been watching an ETF coming along for years earlier, I was way late on it, but finally I'm here, I was prepared. And so made over 50 or 60K on that one. The third trade of the year, which actually just happened 4 days ago as I'm speaking now and making this video, is DXYZ. DXYZ, very similar to SMCI, where just had a really sick blow-off move from the 20s all the way up to about a high of 104, 105. Beautiful first red day. This ticker is pretty interesting that they are the first company, an investment holdings company for private companies. So they have access, or they have exposure to SpaceX, they have exposure to OpenAI, they have exposure to Discord, to Impossible Meats, to Epic Games, all these massive, very high potential, promising private companies that aren't public. This company, DXYZ, has purchased, a portion of their equity and then brought it to the marketplace. Now, the problem is that this is also not similar to the GBTC trade. This is not trading at its net asset value. Its net asset value is worth $5. But because it has all these companies that are very promising, people want exposure to OpenAI or exposure to SpaceX at any cost. So they don't really care or even know where the net asset value or the true value of this fund is, which is at $5. So they bought it up from getting 10 to 20 all the way up to 100. And so at 100, the valuation just doesn't make any sense. It's evaluating SpaceX at like multi-trillions of dollars, which just isn't true. And so it's not sustainable. So that's the fundamental side that gave me some conviction. But beyond that, even if I didn't know that fundamental story, this is still just a beautiful 4-day run from 20 to 100. You give me any chart that looks like this, I'm going to be looking for or attempting some kind of reversal pattern, a reversion to a mean of a red day. And so I actually did short this out the open. Right out the open here, it couldn't even spike. Immediately started panicking. I remember getting short in like the 95, 96 area, risking 100. It was a nice round psychological number that I felt comfortable risking. Did pull back a bit, bounced. I remember that halted up on this bounce, and I was actually scared, like, is this going to rip back over 100 and I'm going to have to stop out? But actually, right when it opened up after the volatility, it halted right down immediately again. So there was clearly, sellers there, and it just faded beautifully. This was one of the better risk reward first red days that I've ever personally traded. Again, I'm getting short at say 95 worst case, risking 100, that's $5 a share. This went from then 95 all the way down to as low as 55. So getting it's like 8-to-1 risk reward, like $5 a risk and $40 a downside is absolutely insane. So again, I risked around 5 to 6K on this trade, and I ended up making 40K on just this pullback. By the morning, I was all out, I believe, in the 60 range. And then obviously it bounced late day into midday into late day. I did end up getting short in the 75 area. A little bit early, I would have loved to get reshort in closer to 80, but it did pull back, made a lower high, and then really collapsed into the close. I covered the rest of that bounce short at around 67, 68, made another 10 grand on top of that. So this entire red day here, I locked in a little over 50 grand. So yeah, those are my 3 best trades of 2024 so far. Pretty happy with them. I would love for these kind of opportunities to continue. So yeah, hopefully get more.
Ever dreamed of trading like one of the Clovers? Well, it all starts with the right broker. Clover Trading and Centerpoint Securities have teamed up to supercharge your trading experience. By joining Unlock the Power of CP Edge exclusively with Centerpoint. We're talking top-tier trading tools worth over $6,000, all at your fingertips. Get ahead with real-time scanners, cutting-edge news, and a tailor-made trading journal. Experience trading like never before with superior short inventory, personalized support, and interest on your idle funds. Plus, you can get competitive pricing that fits your trading style. Ready to elevate your trading game? Click the Clover Trading link in the description below to get exclusive deals with Centerpoint Securities. Now let's get back to the content.
Number one for me is Holo, HOLO. This is a former China liquidation pump and dump scam runner, whatever you want to call it. Has dumped once, twice, 3, and then now 4 times. But again, at the moment of this was particularly February, I, was looking and trying to time the 4th time, right? And so I had thought, after it had ran from, pretty much $4 all the way up to 40, I had thought, okay, it's now fading back down into the 20s and now into the teens. This is going to be my easy ticket to swinging this short and then catching a fade back down to 4, kind of like what it eventually did. But obviously there was more games to be had and things in mind before it actually happened that way. So I was swinging short from around the mid to low 20s over these next 3 days. And unfortunately, I had such a small size that I was planning on risking, pretty much the highs of like 41, 42, which is risk reward wise is terrible. I just thought by the time it was dead back into like the teens, I could really start adding size and then just catch a much slower fade. But again, I had to wait to get there. I had to wait for some kind of confirmation. Obviously, we never got that, and then it squeezed right back to the highs, and I covered. Now, the problem is that was okay. The first initial cover, I lost, maybe 10 grand. Nothing out of the ordinary for me, nothing crazy, nothing that's unacceptable in terms of my realm. The issue is that once it broke out, or once it looked like it was going to squeeze, I thought this run to 100 that happened 3 days later was going to happen on this day. And so I actually ended up flipping my bias and going long. And again, right after I covered was again right near the top of around $40. And so what do you know? I buy the top of that day. I ended up selling on a dip. I think it's holding for 5 minutes. I buy it again. I sell it again. And then fades all the way back down into the 20s. And I'm like, okay, now they're going to kill it. I shorted again, take another loss there. So essentially revenge trading took over. I just started to try to do anything I could to quote unquote make the losses back or be right on the ticker, ultimately turning into what should have been maybe a 10 to 15K loss max, ultimately snowballed into doubling into a 30K loss. So this is still my biggest loss on the year, just due to revenge trading, just due to being undisciplined, and frankly, just having a pretty crappy trade plan from the get. get-go on both sides, long and short. So there's that number one. The second one, and this is kind of like two trades in one. And this is, again, another, if you saw my three best trades, I talked about GBTC with Grayscale. Grayscale has other funds like LTCN and BCHG. So both these were running kind of in unison together. Again, BCHG is Bitcoin Cash and LTCN is Litecoin. And so both these funds own their respective cryptos and then hold them and then allow a lot of people to trade them on the stock market here. And so like GBTC, the net asset value, instead of being at a discount, it's at a massive premium. So also similar to DXYZ, if you saw my big win over there. And net asset value for like LTCN is in like the single digits. It's like $6, $7, $8. And this thing's trading at almost 50, over 50 for, a few hours on this day. Same thing with BCHG. BCHG was trading, his net asset value was also in like the 5 or 4 range. Okay. It's also trading at 20. So this is multiple times higher than where they should be trading, on top of the fact that they are already having a multi-day kind of run up and parabolic. So again, regardless of the fundamental aspect to it, they're just looking technically good. The only issue here was that their volume wasn't great, but it was good enough to trade. The issue is now when I'm looking for a first red day, after having, 4 or 5 green days in a row, they gap down. I think crypto was weak overnight. And so here is LTCN on this day, on specifically the 2nd of April, gapping down at 42s and it closed at 46s. So 10% gap down here. BCHG, I believe, had another 10% gap down as well. This closed at 20, pretty much 1960, and it's opening at like pretty much 18 if I round up. So again, that also was a 10% gap down. And so in my brain, 10% gap down to me was like a trend shift. They're probably going to sell off another 10, 20%. And I was just going to take the morning panic and run. They did anything but that, right? They dipped a little bit out the open, but then just squeezed right back. Ultimately, again, squeezing me out with like really no mercy whatsoever. If we go to like LTNC here, if we go to like a 5 minute, just no mercy. Yeah, it had a couple pullbacks, but never really set any kind of new risk level to risk other than red green for me. And so I pretty much was getting short, in the 42s, 43s, and then had to cover 46 plus. And I did that on LTNC and on BCHG. So combine both trades together, which were kind of like one trade in together, I did lose about 40K on the day. I lost somewhere else, so maybe it was only 30 something grand between the two. And I don't consider this my worst trade because there's nothing really necessarily I did wrong. I maybe oversized a bit. I maybe got a little FOMO by shorting too low, but these were patterns that I was willing to go in risking 10 to 15K each. Unfortunately, both were losers. So we get into the 30K plus kind of range with some slippage added on to that. So it's unfortunate. Again, if I could go back, I would be smaller size, but there's not a world where I wouldn't have taken these trades in the same manner I did. It's just the way they move, the way they trade is just very irregular. It's not natural to what I'm usually used to. And so it played out that way. And I, took bigger losses because of it. So it is what it is. Don't really feel, undisciplined or anything like that when it comes to these trades. The last trade, and this is maybe my third worst just because the P&L is smaller, but it is also a revenge trading. DJT, which is Donald Trump's social media company that he's brought to the market through a SPAC. This ticker was originally DWAC, DWAC, around, on the 26th of March, it became DJT, so it kind of converted itself over. I had very conflicting biases here. On one hand, from the fundamental thesis, this thing was insanely overvalued to what, the actual company and revenues was doing. Vice versa, it's also Donald Trump in the sense that, the media loves having eyes on him. I had multiple personal text messages texting me like, hey, should I be buying this thing? Like, is he going to create this like big new thing? Just the hype around it, right? And so ultimately I knew long-term this was going to go lower, but I had an inclination or like a thesis that this might go much higher, squeeze out shorts first, get some hype and then die before it actually happened. And now, unfortunately, that hype was really just the 25th into the 26th, but I, for some reason, was getting a little greedy thinking it'd go higher. It started off with me longing, thinking, I can long in the low to high 60s or the mid to high 60s and get a move to 75, 80, 85, 90. Ultimately led to me chopping myself up like 2 or 3 times. And then I decided, oh, you know what? It's time to short this thing. It's clearly not going higher. And as you can see here, if we go into like a 15 minute and we go back, this was just a choppy mess to where I then ultimately took 2 or 3 more losses on the short side as well. So I pretty much exhausted myself to a point that I just didn't feel comfortable risking any more money. I ended up losing 15K after all the trades were combined. And that's how you know when I'm not trading poorly, is that when I've taken so many longs and so many shorts and the broker just says, here, Kyle, here's all your trades in ones because you've traded too much. And I didn't even know how down I was because just so many trades got added up. It ultimately led to 15K, which again isn't that bad. I at least had that under control. I knew I wasn't losing much more than 10. But again, still too many tries, 3 longs, like 3 shorts, just too much. And again, I exhausted myself doing that. And because of it, once it was actually time to short it, it faded beautifully, right? As I make this video, it's down to the low 30s. A whole 50% plus off its highs from where I was trading it. So had I just stuck to a better thesis and not tried to get back in and get back out and then get back in and then et cetera, could could have been much more smoothly done of a trade, and I wouldn't have exhausted myself. And even if I did lose, which is okay doing so, I would have then finally stuck to the short idea, the short thesis, and probably profited on any one of these days here. So that's my third worst trade of the year. Thankfully, they're all much smaller than some of my biggest gains in the year, which is what I like for a ratio speaking as the years go on. I want my biggest gains to be much bigger than my biggest losses, even though the losses are not fun per se to take. But anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching me go through my charts here, and we'll see you guys next time.